we have our Mr. Meng Suho. He's going to talk about digital worker companion. A good friend of mine, a partner, and the deputy president of my APARA. He's the MD of Joe Spark Resources, a company that has among its arsenal solutions a world-class transport management system, robotics, and cybersecurity tools. He has gone through an international career with successful business turnaround achievements in many countries. So he holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from University of Melbourne. With that, Ming, all yours.
Thank you, CS, for those kind words. It is really an honor and a pleasure to be on this series of webinars. I've been through the last 4 webinars, and they've really been very, very enlightening. Thank you very much, Oliver and APARA, for organizing this series of webinars. As CS mentioned, we have a company called Dual Spark Resources, and we have offices both in Malaysia and Singapore, hoping for more. We have cybersecurity solutions, and as CS mentioned just now, we have a logistics transporter management system, which I will refer to a bit later on. And we also have a workers management and mobility application, which we developed ourselves. To kick off this discussion, I just want to have a look at the why, the impact of digital technologies on GDP. This is a chart from McKinsey, and on the x-axis we have the baseline consensus growth rates for the period 2017 to 2030, and then on the y-axis we have the AI-led growth of that GDP, and we have a multitude of countries of different per capita GDPs. I've divided this into 4 quadrants, and if we look at the top left-hand quadrant, we have mostly the developed countries. What we find is, if we look at, say, Sweden has a baseline consensus growth of about 1.6, 1.7%, out of which almost all of it is AI-led. So Sweden as a country has embarked on this journey much faster and earlier than a lot of other countries. Then we look at, say, Singapore. Singapore, we are looking at a consensus growth of 2.4, out of which 1.4 is AI-led, which means that there is opportunity for growth, AI-led growth in that country. However, having said that, the higher the AI-led growth percentage share is of GDP, we would expect to see a higher level of disruption, which means that governments and industry have to play a vital role in preparing for the workforce of the future. If we move across to the right, where we have countries like Malaysia, it's quite interesting because Malaysia is very agro and manufacturing led. So looking at the baseline consensus growth of 4.3%, out of which only 1.1% is AI led, that tells us that there is huge opportunity in countries like Malaysia for growth. I will not go into the other countries, the lower 2 quadrants, but that gives us a sense as to the size of the prize, as well as the urgency that we face. Quickly, the next slide is about the impact of digital technologies on GDP, and this is cumulative from 2017 to 2030. And we can see that in terms of augmentation, substitution, and innovation, there is a gross contribution of about 26%, but there will be disruption, and there will be some disruption as a result of digital technologies, and that will dampen total growth by about 10%, leading to about 16% net growth due to the impact of digital technologies. What this says is that we do have a significant impact. Digital technologies will have a significant impact in terms of GDP growth. Legacy systems is something that we have had to live with. I started life as an accountant, and when I started working as an accountant, I had to deal with silo systems, different subsystems for sales, for cost of goods sold, for accounts payable, receivables, the general ledger, and in order to get all the numbers, we spend an inordinate amount of time extracting data from all these different systems and posting journals so that we can get a amalgamated P&L and balance sheet. However, it wasn't business friendly because it was not able to identify the different businesses within the organization, and that required additional work, separate extraction of data using Horror of Horrors, Lotus 123, in order to deliver the kind of information that a business can use. And that in itself proves to be a challenge even till today. This gentleman lived 140 years ago, and what he said 140 years ago is actually pretty much relevant in this day and age. In fact, even more relevant because I would say, I would call it the COVID kerfuffle, has actually accelerated the pace of adoption of digital technologies. What we see is, this is just a recent article from a study done by MIT, and basically companies are accelerating the adoption of AI and machine learning as a result of the kerfuffle. In a survey done, 70% of firms see their workforce to be digital post COVID-19. In fact, I think that they are already seeing a lot of their workforce digital because most people work from home now. In Asia particularly, we are looking at what Ben mentioned, software robots or RPAs would be taking over more and more work in Asia as a result of the demand for automation in Asia. So we are seeing a fairly rapid pace of change. There was a survey done by Aetna International. It wasn't planned because of the pandemic. However, it was done just at the beginning of the pandemic. It was quite an interesting survey because it covered 4,000 over employees across 4 different countries, the UK, US, UAE, and Singapore, and a fairly representative range of ages, genders, job roles, and employment status. In general, a high percentage actually found that digital enablement actually allows them to perform their tasks quicker, connect better, and gives them a better balance, work-life balance. However, there are also challenges. A significant percentage do find challenges because the line between work life and personal life tends to blur a little. And because of the prevalent use of technologies such as emails, there's pressure on them to respond quickly, much faster. I'm sure we have all faced that same pressure to respond the minute we receive a message. And there is some concern about personal privacy because there are some concerns that personal data can be used against them. This was a study done by Gartner back in 2018, and to some extent probably is not as representative anymore. But we can see the trend, which is growing very fast, from 10% RPA to 40%, probably a bit higher now because of the kerfuffle. And by 2022, a lot of the adoption of automation would be somewhere in the region of 85%. And this is a global number, so it's a global average. It'll vary from country to country. But the trend is pretty obvious that there is a significant move to using RPAs in enterprises. So we come to the question, what is a digital worker? It is not just RPA, right? It is actually a more human-centric solution as compared to a process-centric. RPAs are process-centric. A digital worker is more human-centric and tends to apply to digital knowledge workers. However, it does cross the barrier into other areas. So if you look at the table on the right, a traditional job involves firstly a subject matter expert, automated activities, so things from the ERP system, semi-automated activities, inputs required into the system, and the other activities, the manual activities. The subject matter expert is the decision maker in this case. He or she have to make decisions as to what needs to be done, what action needs to be taken, what planning needs to be done, what strategy to apply for a particular activity. In the case of a digital worker, the digital worker actually takes over a majority of the task. The digital worker has the ability to understand, decide, and act accordingly. And the human element is a small part of that activity now. So IBM Automation defines a digital worker as a software-based labor that can independently execute meaningful parts of complex end-to-end processes. So it cuts across different skill sets, using multiple skills that go beyond what RPA tools alone can offer. To give a very quick example, firstly, digital worker is not a bot. So if we take the example of a digital accounts payable clerk, this digital worker is able to do multiple tasks. So invoice processing, extracting an invoice from email. Basically, invoices come through email in the forms of usually PDF documents. The digital worker is able to extract the invoice, and not only extract the invoice, and then pick up all the relevant elements of that invoice which are required to be entered into the system, and go through the process of go through processing it, send it out for authorization. Upon authorization, to then commence the payment process, and at the same time manage all the records required for that particular task. This is a theoretical example. The next example is a real example, which brings me to the solution that we have called Logflows. We have a customer, a global retailer that sells furniture, and they have in a particular location something in the order of 1,500 to 2,000 orders to be delivered in a day. They have a legacy ERP system which is designed for materials and stock control only, but does not have the extension for logistics management, for transportation, for distribution, and customer service. If you look at the chart, they have two kinds of sales, online sales and store sales as well. And this information on a daily basis will be sent to the logistics team. What the logistics team has to do is to get all the documents for each individual order, get the warehouse staff to pick the stocks, pick out all the different orders. At the same time, what they have to do is there's something like 10 different zones in this particular locality. They have to sort all the orders out by zone. They will then have to decide the capacity required for each zone, because that will vary from day to day depending on the number of customers, a number of orders for that particular zone. So in some zones they may need extra capacity, in other zones they may not require so much capacity. They will then have to call the subcontractor. Subcontractor will call in their trucks, load the trucks, and then start the delivery process. In that process, you'll find that the consumer will be sitting on the other end waiting for the order to arrive. And if you're like me, more often than not, you will receive a message, SMS, or phone call saying, please be at home between 8:30 and 12:30, very, very precise, because around that time, your goods will be delivered. And if you're fortunate, the guy will turn up at 9 o'clock. If you're not, 12 o'clock. So for the consumer, it's quite a tedious process. And if anything goes wrong and there's any issue or problem, the consumer has to call customer service. Customer service has to call the logistics team, who then has to contact the contractor, who has to contact the driver. It becomes a very convoluted process, highly manual, and not really effective in terms of delivery. Enter the digital worker. The digital worker actually is here. What does it do? It gives, firstly, visibility. Has the ability to track, monitor, and do the assignment. All the information related to online sales and bricks and mortar sales will be loaded into the planning tool overnight, and the planning tool will then do all the necessary activities required. It will decide, it will send information to the warehouse to do the picking, and it'll be on a last in, first out basis, so that it's easy for the driver. It will look at the capacity required for all the different zones and then decide how much capacity is required, and it will then contact the driver directly saying, tomorrow this, and will deliver the orders to the phone of the driver. So the driver already knows his route. And not only that, it will actually plan the route for the driver based on the most efficient and most effective route available. At the same time, it will send an SMS to the consumer saying, your order will be delivered at around a particular time. And it'll be a much tighter time period as compared to the traditional time. So what the digital worker is able to do is not just automate, but deal with a hugely complex situation, simplify it, and the human element comes in because they will know what to pick where and where to place the goods. The driver will know where to go, the most efficient route, and the consumer will have a very good consumer experience. So what the digital worker is able to do is deliver higher visibility, good for the carbon footprint, reduce paperwork by 80%, good for the better for the truckers, higher truck utilization rate, and obviously that means a lower carbon footprint as well, and for the consumer, a better experience. So keys to success. I like what Thomas mentioned, that it is a complex situation. It is difficult to manage. However, robots IT lacks heart and intuition. I've heard it said another way, that a 3-year-old child has more common sense than artificial intelligence, and that is probably very true. Right? Robots can replace human beings to do processes and even handle complex processes. However, they cannot replace human beings. The digital workforce cannot work in silos without the human workforce, because the human element brings in creativity, relationship, cultural aspects, motivation, decision making, and best practices. The human and digital worker needs to be amalgamated to make automation successful. What it means is employees can be diverted away from the repetitive task, and they can do the more high value add and relationship type task. However, there's always the elephant in the room. Carol Dweck came up with this term, the growth mindset. And all the more as we move into this stage of rapid change, there is also a need for us just to consider that we have to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. I like what the little video that Oliver played at the very beginning, perception versus reality. We have this perception that technology will replace jobs, will destroy jobs, human beings will become redundant. And the reality is, this is based on a study of the census in England and Wales since 1871. And what the results found was that the rise of machines have actually created more jobs and not made the human obsolete. The nature of work has changed. The types of work which have been, which are sometimes we call them the 3Ds, the hard, dangerous, and dull jobs have actually declined. All the better for safety. However, the types of jobs which have increased are more the caring jobs and the knowledge intensity jobs. So jobs which involve healthcare, teaching, care home have actually increased over the period from 1871 to 2011. And technology boosted jobs in other sectors. So being an accountant is very heartening to see that the number of accountants have increased. But they're not just accountants, but also engineers, lawyers, and in fact, we have a lot of new jobs that did not exist. We've got IT professionals, robotic engineers, telecommunication related jobs, which are by far higher in value add. That is not to say that the diminished jobs are of lesser worth. What it means is that the jobs which have declined need to be refocused. People need to be retrained and to help to manage so that they can make the transition from where they are to where they can be. It's just a snapshot of the kind of jobs that existed 12 years ago, that exist today, that were not there tomorrow, 12 years ago, and the kind of jobs we can expect to see in the future. The one that really tickles me is the cultured meat farmers. It's quite. When I saw that, I had this picture in my mind of people in lab coats wearing cowboy hats, producing meat for us to consume. But these are, potential jobs for the future. So, in conclusion, there are future jobs that we need to consider. And I like that expression that said, agility brings out the best of humans, collaboration, creativity, and learning. And that to me sums up the future. That we are an agile species. We have adapted tremendously, and indeed, perception versus reality. The reality is, yes, some jobs will reduce and diminish, but there will be new jobs that will be created, which will be of real benefit to us as humans. And the human being will always be required. What is required is reskilling, identification of the skills required for the future, reskilling, and new capability. I'll just conclude by saying this. One of the questions sometimes asked of me is, why do I do what I do? To me, is very simple. A historian once said this. He said, you can actually catch up in Industry 4.0, Industry 3.0, sorry, because you can buy the equipment, you can build your own processes, and build your own markets. I remember, there was life before steel and life after steel. The Industrial Revolution changed with the discovery and the use of steel in manufacturing. So there was a clear line of distinction between manufacturing before steel and manufacturing after steel. We are at that same pivotal point now in our history, where it's life before AI and life after AI. And the digital worker is a form of artificial intelligence implemented in the workforce. And it will change. It will definitely change the way we work. It will definitely change the future of work. But I do believe that if history is anything to go by, we will not only adapt, but we will prosper. So the digital worker is definitely a companion for us going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I learned two things from you. A and A. Adopt and adapt. That would be our